They say every strength has a shadow, and every shadow eventually meets the light. In the reckless streets of Ibadan, where survival writes its own rules, one name begins to travel faster than fear: Latifat. A collector not of money alone but of truth, of choices, and of consequence. The sun rises lazily over the roasted rooftop of Okeado, stretching its golden fingers across the narrow street like a landlord collecting overdue rent. The morning here carried the scent of fried akara, ambitions, and quiet desperation, three things that defined the city. And somewhere between hope and hardship walked Latifat. Latifat was not just a woman, she was a storm wrapped in Ankara, a tinkling clock in human form. Where others knocked politely, she arrived like thunder, announced unavoidably and unforgettably. People said her footstep alone could make a debtor remember forgotten promises. She was a professional loan collector, not the kind who sits behind a desk shuffling papers. No, Latifat walked the street. She knew every corner, every hidden place, every excuses ever invented by man in our world. Debts were not numbers, they were storm stories of greed, survival, betrayal, and sometimes poor misfortune. And Latifat, she collected them all. That morning, she adjusted a scarf in the cracked mirror hanging by a nail on her wall. The mirror, like her life, was broken but still functional. Her eyes were sharp, like a blade that had tasted too many battles to grow dull. Today, she murmured, no one escapes. Her voice was calm, but beneath it lies a fire that refused to die. She stepped outside, and the city greeted her like an old accomplice. Children ran barefoot, chasing dreams they didn't yet understand. Traders shouted prices as if their voice alone could multiply profit. And somewhere, a man lied to himself that today would be different. Latifa smiled faintly. She had heard that lies before. Her first stop was Alaji Muka's shop. Alhaji Muka was a man whose promises flowed like river but dried up just as quickly. He borrowed money 3 months ago, swearing by heavens and earth that he will repay next week. Next week has come and gone, like a thief in the night. Latifa didn't knock, she entered. The bell above the door rang, its cheerful sound a sharp contrast to the tension that followed. Alhaji Muka froze. "Ah, Latifa," he said, his smile trembling like a leaf in a storm. "You see, I was just planning to—" "Planning?" she interrupted, her voice soft and heavy. "Planning does not pay debt, Alhaji." Her voice landed like stones dropped into still water, rubbles spreading unavoidably. The shop grew quiet. Even the air seems to hold its breath. Latifa stepped closer. Her presence filled the room. She didn't need to shout. Power, like perfume, announced itself without noise. "You borrowed money?" she continued. "Not time." Alhaji wiped his forehead, sweat gathering like convulsion. He could no longer hide. "I just need a little more time." Latifat raised her head. No, that solid word was a wall. Solid. Final. Outside life continued as usual. But inside that small shop, a battle was being fought. Not with fist, but with truth. Not with weapons, but with consequences. Latifa leaned in slightly. "Do you know what debt is?" she asked. Alhaji said nothing. "It is a shadow," she said. "The more you run, the longer it follows. But when you stop—" She paused, her eyes looking into his. "It stands right in front of you." Her voice softened, not with pity, but with understanding caved from experience. "Pay what you can today." Hours passed. Latifa moved from street to street, like a wind that refused to rest. Some paid willingly, relieving watching over them like rain after drought. Others resisted, clinging to excuses like lifelines woven from lies. But Latifat was patient. and patience in her hand was more dangerous than anger. By midday, the sun stood high, watching everything like a silent judge. Latifat wiped her face, her strength unshaken, but her body reminding her she was still human. Still, she continued, because for Latifat, this was not just a job, it was survival. But beneath her ardent exterior lived a story no one knew, a past that shaped her like fire shaped iron. Once long ago, Latifat had been the one who owned, the one who begged for time, the one who was watching doors closed like chapters she was not allowed to finish. And when no one came to help her, she became the person no one could ignore. As evening approached, the sky painted itself in shape of orange and regret. Latifat stood at the edge of the road, counting the money she had collected. Each note told a story. Every coin whispers a lesson. But one name remained on her list. Kunle, the only debtor who had never run, never lied, never begged. And that made him the most dangerous of all. Latifat exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, she said. The word hung in the air like an unfinished sentence, because some debtors are not paid with money. And as the night wrapped the city in its dark embrace, Latifat walked home, not as a villain, not as a hero, but as something far more complicated. A woman shaped by survival, a collector of debt, a keeper of truth, and a reminder that nothing borrowed ever truly disappears. Night did not fall gently. It arrived like a certain pull, too quickly, swallowing the last trace of daylight and leaving the city to wrestle with itself. In Okeado, darkness was not the absence of light, it was a different kind of truth, and Latifat walked through it like she belonged to both worlds. The street light flickered uncertainly, like witnesses afraid to testify. Shadows stretched long and thin, clicking to walls like secrets that refused to die. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, not in warning, but in recognition. Latifat was still walking, because depth, like hunger, does not sleep. She turned into a narrow alley, one that smelled of dumped earth and forgotten dreams. This was where excuses came to hide, where men who once spoke loudly now whispers to themselves. Her destination was a small, crooked house at the end of the path. Bisi, unlike the others, Bisi did not run. She did not also pay, but that made her a different kind of problem. Latifat knocked once, twice. The third knock carried weight, the kind that echoes inside a person's conscience. The door cracked open. Bisi stood there, her face tired, her eyes carrying the kind of silence that words could not translate. A baby slept on her back, tied with a faded wrapper that had seen better days. Latifat, Bisi said quietly, no fear, no excuses, just truth. Latifat paused. For a brief moment, something inside her shifted, like a stone, remembering it was once part of a mountain. I came for what you owe, she said, her voice firm but not harsh. Bisi nodded slowly. I know. She stepped aside. Come in. The room was small, so small it felt like the walls were closing in on each other. Out of pity, a single lantern burned weakly, its flame dancing like it was unsure whether to live or die. Latifat entered. Her eyes scanned everything, not out of suspicion, but habit. A collector always observed. It was how she read stories, reading without words. And this one was loud, too loud. There is no money, Bisi said. The walls felt flat, like a plate with nothing in it. Latifat crossed her arm. Then, why didn't you run? Bisi smiled faintly. A person who runs from death, she said, is only practicing how to run from themselves. The answer lingered in the air, Latifat felt it, not as sand, but as weight. Talk, Latifat said. Busy hesitated, then sat down slowly, adjusting the baby on her back. My husband borrowed the money, she began. He said it was for business, said we would finally breathe. Her voice cracked like a dry ground begging for rain. But the business failed. Then he left. The lantern flickered as if failure was contagious. Latifat said nothing because silence sometimes is the loudest response. I tried. Bisi continued. I sold everything. I worked. I begged. But every day she looked up, her eyes glintering. Every day the debt grows teeth. Latifat's jaw tightened. She understood that feeling too well. For a moment, the room heard two versions of the same story. One who escaped it, one who was still trapped inside. Latifat stepped forward. You think I don't know hardship? She asked quietly. Bisi didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. I was once like you. Latifat continued, knocking on doors, waiting for mercy that never came. Her voice was steady, but beneath it, something trembling. I learned something, she said. Mercy is expensive, and most people are too poor to give it. The baby stirred. A soft cry filled the room, fragile as glass. Bisi gently rocked her, and in that moment, Latifah saw something she had trained herself to ignore. Not weakness, not failure, but responsibility. How much can you pay? Latifat asked. Bisi blinked, surprised. Today, she whispered. Yes. Bisi reached under a worn out pillow and brought out a small bundle of notes, crumpled, humble, honest. Latifat took it, counted. It was barely enough to matter, but it was everything Bisi had. Latifat exhaled slowly. Then something unexpected happened. She put part of the money back into Bisi's hand. Bisi froze. I don't understand. Latifat looked at her. Debt is not just about money, she said. It is about balance. Her eyes softened, not with pity, but with recognition. You have paid more than some who own twice as well. Bisi lips trembled. Thank you, she whispered. But Latifat shook her head. Don't thank me, she said. Just don't stop trying. And Latifat stepped outside. That night felt different. Not lighter, but quieter, like it had witnessed something rare and decided to keep it. She walked on, a step slower now, not from exhaustion, but thought, because tonight had remembered her of something dangerous, something she had buried beneath layers of discipline and survival, compassion. But compassion was a crack, and cracks could break everything. The next morning arrived too quickly, and with it came a name that refused to stay silent. Only Latifat stood outside his compound, unlike the others. His house was not small, not broken, not desperate. It stood tall, confident, almost arrogant, like a man who believed consequence were optional. Latifat adjusted her scarf. Her eyes hardened because this was not going to be like Bisi. She knocked. The gate opened almost immediately, and there he stood. Kunle, calm, composed, smiling, like a man who had been expecting her. Latifat, he said smoothly, you took your time? Her eyes narrowed. And you? She replied, hold your time. Kunle chuckled. Money, he corrected. I owe money. Latifat stepped closer. No, she said quietly. You owe more than that. Something flickered in Kunle's eyes. Not fair, recognition. Come in, he said. And just like that, the real story began. The compound was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the dangerous kind. The kind that hides intention behind politeness, like a knife wrapped in velvet. Latifat stepped inside, her eyes alert, her instinct awake. The hair smiled faintly of wealth and control. polished tie, trimmed edges, and a silence that suggested nothing here ever happened by accident. Kunle closed the gate behind her. The sound echoed. Final. Sit, he said, gesturing towards a chair in the veranda. Latifat did not move. I didn't come here to rest, she replied. Kunle smiled, slow and deliberate, like a man unbothered by storm. No, he said, you came to collect. His voice carried a calmness that felt rehearsed, like he had practiced this moment in his head long before it arrived. Latifat folded her arms. Then don't waste my time. Kunle walked past her, unhurried, as if time itself answered to him. He poured himself a glass of water and drank, his movement smooth, calculated. You have changed, he said suddenly. Latifat's expression didn't shift. People do, she replied. Kunle turned to her face. But not you, he said. Not really? That sentence landed differently, not like an insult, not like a compliment, but like a memory knocked on a locked door. Latifat's eyes hardened. If you have something to say, she said, say it. Kunle nodded. I will. He stepped closer, closer than comfort, closer than necessary. You collected debt now. Continued. You walk into people's life and demand accountability like you were never on the other side. Latifat jaw tightening. You don't know anything about me. Kunle laughed softly, but there was no woman in it. Oh, Latifat, he said, I know exactly who you are. The name hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. Not her title, not her reputation, her name. And suddenly, the past carefully buried, tightly sealed, shifted. 3 years ago, Kunle began. 3 years ago, Kunle began. A young woman came to me, desperate, angry, proud. Latifat didn't blink, but inside, something moved. She needed money. He continued, not for luxury, not for business, his voice softening, for survival. Latifat inhaled quickly, controlled, measured, but the room felt smaller now, like the walls were listening. She said she would pay me back. Kunle said, sworn it. In fact, with the kind of confidence only desperation can give. He paused. She never did. Silence, heavy, unavoidably. Latifat finally spoke. If this is your way of avoiding payment. Kunle raised his hand. Let me finish. His tone changed. No longer soft, no longer playful. Now, sharp. You disappeared, he said. No message, no explanation, nothing. Latifat's voice dropped. I survived. Kunle's eyes locked into hers. So did I, he replied, the tension between them tightening like a rope pulled from both ends. Latifat stepped forward. If I owe you, she said, her voice steady, you should have come for your money. Kunle smiled again, but this time it was different. This time it was edged with something darker. I did. Latifah froze. When? Kunle gaze didn't waver. You just didn't recognize me. The words hit like a sudden thunder, unexpected, violent, disorienting. Latifat searched her face carefully, slowly, and then something clicked. Not fully, but enough. You, she began. Kunle nodded. Yes. The past was no longer a shadow. It was standing in front of her, alive, patient, waiting. I helped you, Kunle said, when no one else would. I gave you money when you had nothing but pride and hunger. His voice hardened, and you walk away. Latifat's chest rose and fell, not from fear, but from something far more complicated. I didn't walk away, she said quietly. I was pushed. Kunle's expression shifted, just slightly. Curiosity, doubt. Explain, he said. Latifat hesitated because some truths are not easy to revisit. They didn't sit quietly, they burned. The morning you gave me, she began. It didn't last. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried the weight of memory. My mother was dying. They blinked, just once. The hospital bills kept growing. She continued, like a fire that refused to go out. Every day they asked for more. She swallowed, and when the money finished, her voice cracked, just slightly. They stopped treating her. The silence that followed was different, not tense, not sharp, but heavy, with something unspeakable. She died, Latifat said. Kule looked away for the first time since she arrived. I didn't disappear, Latifat continued. I broke. The words were quiet, but they carried more power than any shout. Kule exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he had held for too long, and after that he asked, Latifat straightening. I learned, she said, that the world does not wait for your pain. It moves, it demands, it collects. Her eyes met his again, so I began the one who collects first. Kule nodded slowly, understanding, or something close to it, began to form. So now, he said, you stand here asking me to pay? Latifa didn't hesitate. Yes. Kule smiled again, but this time it wasn't mocking, it wasn't defensive, it was thoughtful. Then, tell me, he said, stepping closer, are you here as a collector? He paused, or as a debtor? The question cut deeper than any accusation because the answer was not simple. Latifat held his gaze, unflinching, unyielding. I am here, she said slowly, as someone who understands the cost of not paying. Kunle studied her long, carefully. Then, without another word, he turned and walked inside. Latifat waited. The air felt still, like the world itself was holding its breath. Moments later, Kunle returned with money, a thick bundle, neatly arranged, undeniable. He handed it to her. Latifat took it, counted, complete. No excuses, she asked. Kunle shook his head. No, he said, some debts are better paid than carried. Latifat nodded, but something about the moment felt unfinished. As she turned to leave, Kule spoke again. Latifat. She stopped, but didn't turn. You still owed me, he said. Her fingers tightened slightly around the money. For what? She asked. Kule's voice was calm, but certain. For the version of you that disappeared. Latifat closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. Some debts, she said quietly, cannot be repaid. And with that, she walked away. But this time, the weight she carried was not just money, it was memory. It was truth. It was something far more dangerous than debt, unfinished business. The morning did not wait for Latifat. It arrived loud, too loud, like a drumbeat announcing trouble before it shows its face. The street of Okeado buzzed with unusual energy, whispers traveling faster than Danfo buses, waving through corners, slipping into ears that were always hungry for news. And today, the news had a name, Latifat. She felt it before she had it. The sneer, the pause in conversation, the way people looked at her, not with fear this time, but with something sharper, curiosity. Latifat adjusted her scarf and kept walking, her steps steady, her face unreadable, but inside, her thoughts moved like restless waves. Something had changed, and she needed to know what. Have you heard? A trader whispered as she passed. They said someone is coming. Another replied, someone stronger. Latifat didn't stop, but she listened because, in her word, information was currency, and today it was being spent freely. By the time she reached her usual corner, Musa was waiting. Musa, the street informant, a man whose ears were everywhere and whose loyalty belonged only to survival. If the city had a heartbeat, Musa knew it rang. You are in trouble, he said without greeting. Latifat raised an eyebrow. I've been in trouble before. Musa shook his head. Not this time. Latifat crossed her arm. Talk. Musa leaned closer, lowering his voice. They have brought in someone new from Lagos. The name Lagos alone carried weight, fast money, harder people, sharper deals. A collector, Musa continued, but not like you. Latifat lifted cup slightly. There is no one like me. Musa didn't smile. This one didn't collect with patience. He said, he collects with fear. The words hang in the air like smoke. What is his name? Latifat asked. Musa hesitated. Then he said it. Femi. The name didn't mean anything, but the silence that followed did. They say he didn't talk twice, Musa added. They said when he knocked doors, people don't negotiate, they surrender. He paused, and if they didn't, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Latifat exhaled slowly. Who brought him? Musa's eyes shifted. The company. That got her attention. The company, the invisible force behind the loans, the debt, the system itself. They didn't interfere unless something was wrong, very wrong. They think you are gone soft, Musa said carefully. Latifat's eyes darkened. Soft? The word felt like an insult wrapped in misunderstanding. Because of busy, she said. Musa didn't answer, but silence has a language of its own. Latifat laughed, but there was no woman in it. So mercy is now a crime. In your line of work, Musa said quietly, yes. The truth hit hard because it wasn't wrong. Latifat looked away, her mind racing. All these years, she had built a name, a reputation, a presence that walked into room before she did. And now, it was being questioned. Where is he? She asked. Musa hesitated again, then pointed. Old warehouse, near the bridge. Latifat nodded. Good. Musa frowned. Good. You are not seriously? I am, she said. Latifat, Musa warned, this man is not like the others. He didn't negotiate. He didn't listen. He will learn, she cut in. Her voice was calm, but it carried steel. Because Latifat understood something Musa didn't. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, identity, survival. And she was not ready to lose any of it. The warehouse stood like a forgotten memory, large, silent, and heavy with histories. The walls were stained with times, the door worn from years of use and neglect. Latifat approached without hesitation because fear was the language she refused to speak. She pushed the door open. It cracked loudly, announcing her presence. Inside, the air was thick, still, waiting. Bold, a voice said from the shadow. Latifat stepped in fully, necessarily, she replied. A figure emerged, tall, broad, still, like a statue, carved from intimidation. Femi, he looked at her, his eyes cold, calculating. So, he said, you are the famous Latifat. Latifat met his gaze. And you are the replacement. A faint smile touched Femi's lips. I don't replace, he said. I improve. Latifat scoffed. By threatening people, Femi smoked. By getting results. The tension between them thickened, like air before a storm. You have been lenient, Femi continued. You let emotions interfere. You forgot what this job is. Latifat stepped closer. No, she said. I remember exactly what it is. Then remind me, Femi challenged. Latifat's heart sharpening. It's not just about calculating money, she said. It's about understanding why it wasn't paid in the first place. Femi laughed. A short, dismissive sound. That's your problem, he said. You think too much. And you don't think at all. Latifat fired back. Silence, heavy, charged. Femi expression adding. I don't need to understand people, he said. I just need them to pay. Latifat shook his head. And when they count, Femi stepped closer. Then the lane. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was not. Latifat felt it then. The difference between them. She collected debt. He enforced them. And suddenly, the job she had mastered felt unfamiliar. You won't last, Femi said. Latifat laughed slightly. I already have. Femi leaned in. Not anymore. The challenge was clear, unspoken, but undeniable. Latifat turned to leave because some battles are not fought with fist, but with time. As she stepped out of the warehouse, the sun hit her face, bright, unforgiving, real. The city was still moving, still breathing, still owing, but now it was watching, waiting, because two collectors could not rule the same street, and sooner or later, one of them will have to fall. Latifat adjusted her scarf, her eyes steady, her mind made up. This is not over, she murmured. No, it was just beginning. The city had chosen silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because too much was at stake. Okeado was no longer just a place of trade and survival. It has become a chessboard. And every debtor, every trader, every whispering bystander was not a piece waiting to be moved. At the center of it all stood two players, Latifat and Femi. The tension spread like harmattan dust. Fine, persistent, impossible to ignore. Debtors begin to change their behaviors. Doors that are once opened casually for Latifat now opened halfway, uncertain, not out of disrespect, but confusion. Who do we answer to now? A shopkeeper asked in hushed tones. The one who listened, another replied. No, a third countered, voice trembling. The one who doesn't give you a choice. Fear and respect, mercy and control, two systems, one street. Latifat watched it all unfold. And she understood something quickly. If she reacted emotionally, she would lose. So she did what she did best. She observed. That afternoon, she returned to a familiar place, Bissy's house. Bissy opened the door, surprise flickering around her face. Latifat, Latifat stepped inside. How much do you still owe? She asked. Bissy hesitated. Why? Because today, Latifat said, we finished something. Busy eyes widened slightly. There is still time. No, Latifat interrupted gently. There is no more time. Not with him. Yeah. Busy understood immediately. Fear passed across her face like a shadow. That man, she whispered. He came yesterday. Latifat's expression didn't change. What did it do? Busy swallowed. He didn't shout, she said. He didn't threaten. She paused. That was the frightening part. Latifat nodded slowly. Yes, she understood that type. He just stood there. Busy continued and said, if I didn't pay soon, something in my life will. The room felt colder. Latifat reached into her bag and pulled out money. Busy froze. I can't take that. You are not taking it, Latifat said. You are finishing your debt. Busy eyes filled with tears. But why? Latifat looked at her, not as a collector, but as someone who had once stood in the same place. Because, she said quietly, if you come back, he won't see your effort. Busy voice broke. He will only see what I owe. Latifat nodded. Yes. Silence filled the room, thick with gratitude, confusion, and something deeper. You are changing the rule? Busy said softly. Latifat shook her head. No, she replied. I'm reminding them why the rules exist. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust and distant voices. Change was coming, fast. By evening, the news had spread. Latifat had cleared a debtor balance, not with threat, not with prayer, but with her own money. Some called it madness, others called it power. Femi called it weakness. Interesting move, he said later that night. Standing in the same warehouse, his voice echoed against the wall. Latifat stood across him, calm as ever. You are buying loyalty, Femi continued. Latifat tilted her head slightly. And you are buying fear. Femi smiled. Fear is faster, but it doesn't last, she replied. Femi stepped closer. Neither does kindness. Latifat didn't move. Kindness built something. Fear never can, she said. And what is that? Femi challenged. Latifat's eyes locked into his. Choice. Femi laughed again, but this time it was sharper. People don't want choice, he said. They want relief. And you would think fear gives them that? Latifat asked. No, Femi said calmly. It forced them to find it. The argument hung between them. Two philosophies colliding, neither willing to bend. You are not here to debate, Femi said finally. No, Latifat agreed. I'm here to warn you. That got his attention. This is my territory, she continued. My people, my system. Femi's expression didn't change. You can stay, she added, but you will not destroy what I built. Femi took a step closer. Now they stood inches apart. Or what? He asked quietly. Latifat's voice dropped, not louder, but heavier. Or you will find out, she said. Why they call me before they call you? Silence. Tick. Electric. Then Femi stepped back, smiling. I was hoping you would say that, he said, because now it was no longer business, it was war. The next few days moved quickly, too quickly. Debtors began choosing sides. Some ran to Latifat, seeking understanding, hoping for time. Others rushed to Femi, paying quickly, desperately, just to avoid his attention. The streets divided, not physically, but emotionally. And in the middle of it all, Latifat felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Prayer. Not fear, never fear, but the weight of responsibility. Because now it wasn't just about collecting debt, it was about protecting people from a system that was beginning to lose its balance. And the question was no longer who would win, but what would be left after the victory. That night, as Latifat sat alone, counting money that suddenly felt heavier than usual, a thought crossed her mind. What if I'm wrong? The question was quiet, dangerous, because doubt was the one thing she could not afford. But outside, the city continued to whisper, and somewhere in the darkness, Femi was making its next move. The city no longer whispered, it watched, carefully, closely, like an audience waiting for the moment the performance would turn into tragedy. Latifat felt it the moment she stepped outside that morning. The air was different, heavier, not with dust or heat, but with expectation. Something had happened, or what about to? Before she could ask, Musa came running, not walking, not strolling, running. And Musa never ran unless the news was chasing him. Latifat, he called, breathing uneven. There's a problem. Latifat didn't panic. She didn't rush. She simply looked at him. What happened? Musa bent slightly, catching his breath. It's Kunle. That name landed like a stone, dropped into deep water. Silent as first, then rebels. What about him? She asked, her voice steady. Musa hesitated, and in that hesitation, Latifat understood something was wrong. Very wrong. They attacked him. The word did not stop, but for Latifat, it slowed. When? She asked. Last night, Musa replied. At his house. Latifat fingered, tightening slightly. Is he alive? Musa nodded. Barely. The word hung in the air like a fragile thread. Who did it? She asked. Musa didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Latifat's eyes hardened. Femi. Musa finally spoke. People said so. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of realization, of consequence, of truth arriving too late. Latifat turned, already moving. Where is he? Clinic near the market. Musa said quickly, but Latifat didn't wait. The walk felt longer than usual, not because of distance, but because of what waited at the end of it. Kunle, the man who had once stood strong, composed, untouchable, now reduced to barely. The clinic was small, crowded, alive with quiet suffering. The smell of antiseptic and fear lingered in the air. Latifat stepped inside, every eye stunned, not out of curiosity, but recognition. Even her, her presence carried weight. Where is he? She asked. The nurse pointed silently. Latifat walked towards the room. Each step felt heavier, like she was walking into something she could not undo. She pushed the door open. Kunle laid on the bed, still, too still. Bandages wrapped around his arm, his head, his side. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, vulnerability. Latifat paused, because seeing him like this changed something. Latifat, he said weakly. His voice was quieter, but it still carried recognition. She stepped closer. What happened? She asked. Kule let out a faint breath. You already know. Latifat's jaw tightening. He came at night. Kule continued. Didn't knock, didn't speak. A weak smile touched his lips. Just like you said, he enforced. Latifat looked away. The truth had shape now, and it was ugly. I paid, Kunle added. That made her look back. I paid everything, he said, even what I didn't owe. The word sank deep, but it wasn't about the money. Kunle continued. It was about the message. Latifat's voice dropped. What message? Kunle's eyes met ours. That this is no longer your city. Silence. For the first time since this began, Latifat felt something dangerous. Not fear, but anger. Real anger. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that settles quietly and waits. You should have stayed out of it, Kunle said softly. Latifat shook her head. No. Kunle frowned slightly. If I stay out of it, she said, then I became part of the problem. Kunle studied her. Even in pain, he saw it. The shift. Isn't it just about debt anymore? Is it? He asked. Latifat's answer was simple. No, because now it was personal. As she turned to leave, Kunle spoke again. Latifat. She stopped. Be careful, he said. Latifat didn't turn. I'm done being careful, she replied. And then she walked out. The sun outside was harsh, unforgiving, but it matched what was building inside her. Enough was enough. Femi had crossed the line, not just a collector, but something worse. And now, Latifat had a choice. Continue playing by rules that no longer exist, or become something the city had never seen before. Something even Femi could not expect. That evening, she stood alone at the edge of the bridge, watching, watching the water to move beneath her. Restless, relentless, unstoppable. Depth, she murmured, is supposed to teach people responsibility. Her reflection trembled in the water. But what happened? She continued. When the ones collecting it lose theirs, the wind answered. Cold, sharp. Latifat lifted her head. Her eyes no longer conflicted, no longer doubtful. Clear. If he wants war, she said quietly, then he will learn the cost of it. Behind her, footstep approached. Musa, you heard? He asked. Latifat nodded. What are you going to do? Musa pressed. Latifat turned slowly. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were no longer the same. I'm going to collect, she said. Musa phoned. From who? Latifat's voice dropped. From him. The wind picked up again, and somewhere in the distance, the city held its breath because the rules had changed, and Latifat was about to rewrite them. The night did not feel like night. It felt like a warning. Okeado had gone unusually quiet, as though the city itself had decided to step back and watch what would happen next. Even the wind seemed cautioned, moving softly between buildings like it didn't want to be noticed. Because tonight something was going to break. Latifat walked alone. No hesitation, no escort, no announcement. Her footsteps echoed faintly against the empty road, steady as a ticking clock, counting down to something inevitable. She wasn't searching. She already knew where to go. The warehouse. It stood in the distance, dark and patient, like a beast that knew its prey was coming willingly. Latifah didn't slow down. If anything, she walked faster. Inside, a single light bulb flickered. Femi stood beneath it, waiting. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come, he said without turning. Latifat stepped fully into the light. I didn't run, she replied. Femi turned slowly, his expression calm, almost amused. I know, he said. That's why you are dangerous. Latifah's eye didn't leave his. And you, she said, are reckless. Femi smiled faintly. Reckless gets results. Latifah took another step forward. So does understanding she encountered. Femi shook his head, still holding on to that. He said, after everything, Latifah's voice hardened. You attacked Kunle. Femi didn't deny it. He paid. Femi said simply. Latifah's jaw tightening. That wasn't collection, she said. That was intimidation. Femi's expression shifted slightly and it worked. The words hit like a slap, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thin and sharp like a blade. Then Latifat spoke again. "You are not here to collect," she said. "You are here to take over." Femi didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Control is cleaner than coerce. He said finally, "And right now, your system is messy." Latifat laughed softly. "Messy?" she repeated. "You call people struggling messy." "I call inefficiency messy," Femi replied. Latifat stepped closer. Now they were face to face. Two forces, two ideologies. "You think fear is efficient?" she said. "I know it is," Femi replied. Latifat shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "Fear is fast, but it breaks things." Femi leaned in slightly. "And sometimes," he said, "things need to break." The words settled heavily, because deep down, Latifat knew he believed that. "Then, let me ask you something," she said. Femi raised an eyebrow. "When everything is broken," she continued, "what exactly are you left collecting?" Femi paused, just for a second, but it was enough. Latifat saw it, and she pressed. "You don't build anything," she said. "You destroy, then call it order." Femi's expression hardened. "And you?" He shot back. "Protect weakness and call it justice." The air thickened. Every word now carried weight. "This is your last chance," Femi said, his voice dropping. "Step aside." Latifat didn't hesitate. "No." The answer was simple, final. Femi nodded slowly, as if he expected nothing less. "Then you have no choice," he said. Latifat's eyes sharpened. "Good," she replied, "because neither did he." The moment snapped. Femi moved first, fast, direct, but Latifat was ready. She stepped back, deflecting his movement. Not with brute force, but precision. She wasn't stronger, but she was smarter. "You rely too much on power," she said, circling slightly. "And you rely too much on thinking," Femi countered. They moved again, closer, sharper. Not a fight of fist alone, but of control, timing, understanding. Femi locked again, more aggressive this time. Latifat dodged, but barely. "You see," Femi said, hesitation. Latifat steadied herself. "No," she replied, restrained, her eyes locked. Because that was the difference. Femi fought to dominate. Latifat fought to decide. The next movement came faster, cleaner. Latifat shifted, using his momentum against him. For a brief seconds, Femi lost balance, not defeated, but surprised. And in that moment, Latifat spoke. "This is what you don't understand," she said. Femi recovered quickly, stepping back. "You think strength is about force?" She continued. Her voice was calm, controlled, but real strength. She paused. "It's knowing when not to use it." Femi wiped his hands around his face, breathing slightly, heavier now. "Philosophy doesn't win fight," he said. Latifat tilted her head. "No," she replied, "but it decides why you fight." Silence fell again. This time, different. Not tension, not anger, recognition. Femi studied her, long, carefully. "You are not afraid of me," he said. Latifat shook her head. "I'm not afraid of what I understand." Femi exhaled slowly. "And what do you understand?" he asked. Latifat's answer came without hesitation. "That you are not the real problem." That caught him off guard. "What?" he said. Latifat stepped closer, not as an opponent, but as someone who had seen too much. "You are just a tool," she said. "A sharper one, yes, but still a tool." Femi's eyes narrowed. "For who?" he asked. Latifat's voice dropped. "The company." The words settled heavily between them, because now the fight had a new shape. Bigger, deeper, more dangerous. Femi didn't speak, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly, and Latifat saw it. Doubt. "Ask yourself," she said quietly, "who benefits when everything is broken?" Femi looked away for the first time, not defeated, but thinking. And sometimes that was more powerful than any blow. Latifat stepped back. "This isn't over," she said. Femi nodded slowly. "No," he agreed. "It's not." But now, the war had changed. It was no longer Latifat versus Femi. It was something bigger and far more dangerous. As Latifat walked out of the warehouse, the night felt different again. Not heavy, not quiet, but alive, because the truth had begun to surface. And once truth rises, it does not go back down. Latifat looked up at the dark sky. "They think we are fighting each other," she murmured. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "Good, because the best way to win a war, is to change what the war is about." The night carried secrets, but by morning, they were ready to be exposed. Latifah did not sleep, not because she couldn't, but because her mind refused to rest. Femi's face lingered in her thought, not as an enemy, not anymore, but as something else, a question. And questions, Latifah knew, were far more dangerous than answer. At dawn, the city stretched awake, unaware that something beneath its daily realm had shifted. Traders opened shop, hawkers called out prices. Life continued as if nothing had changed. But Latifat saw it differently now. Every transaction, every borrowed naira, every promise to pay later, it was all part of something bigger, a system. A system were built by people, which meant they could be broken. Musa found her where she always stood at sunrise, near the edge of the main road, where the city heartbeat was louder. "You look like someone planning trouble," he said. Latifah didn't smile. "I'm planning clarity." Musa frowned. "That sound worse." Latifah turned to him. "Tell me everything you know about the company." Musa blinked. "Everything?" "Yes," he hesitated. "Because even in a city full of secrets, the company was different. They don't show themselves. They began slowly. They don't argue. They don't explain." He swallowed. "They just decide." Latifat nodded. "And the collectors?" Musa exhaled. "We are tools," he said. "Some blunt, some sharp." He glanced at her. "You are the one they couldn't control." Latifat's eye narrowed slightly. "Until now?" Musa shook his head. "No," he said. "That's why they brought Femi. The truth settled like dust after a storm. They don't want balance," Latifat murmured. "They want obedience." Musa didn't argue, because deep down he knew it was true. "Where do they operate from?" she asked. Musa hesitated again, longer this time. Then, finally, "There is an office," he said. "Not public, not obvious." He lowered his voice. "Behind the old bank building." Latifah nodded once. That was all she needed. By midday, the sun burned high, unforgiving and watchful. Latifah stood across the street from the building Musa had described. It looked ordinary, too ordinary, but Latifah knew better. Power rarely announced itself. It hid. She stepped forward. Inside, the air was cold, not physically, but emotionally. The kind of cold that comes from decision made without feeling. A receptionist looked up. Her smile was polite. "Empty. Can I help you?" she asked. Latifah didn't sit, didn't soften. "I'm here to see who's in charge." The receptionist blinked. "Just once. I'm afraid you need an appointment." "I'm afraid," Latifah interrupted calmly. "You don't understand." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I'm not here to request," she continued. "I'm here to collect." Silence fell, heavy. The receptionist's smile faded slightly. "Please wait," she said, standing quickly. Moments later, a door opened. "Let her in." The voice came from inside, smooth, controlled. Latifat stepped forward. The office was large, minimal, precise, and behind the desk sat a man who looked like he had never rushed a single decision in his life. "Latifat," he said, as if her name had been waiting for her. She didn't respond to the familiarity. "You've caused quite a disturbance," he continued. Latifat crossed her arm. "You've caused more." The man smiled faintly. "Sit," he said. Latifat remained standing. "I prefer to stand," she replied. The man nodded, as if that confirmed something he already believed. "Strong," he said. "Predictable." Latifat's eyes sharpening. And you, she said, hide behind others. The man leaned back slightly, unbothered. That's called structure, he replied. Latifat took a step forward. No, she said, that's called control. The room grew quiet. You sent Femi, she continued. The man didn't deny it. You are losing efficiency, he said simply. Latifat let out a short breath. Efficiency? She repeated. People are not machines. They are variables. He corrected. The word landed cold. Latifat felt it, not as anger, but as clarity. This was the difference. To her, people were stories. To him, they were numbers. You break them, she said quietly. We optimize them, he replied. Latifat shook her head slowly. No, she said. You remove everything that makes them human. The man studied her, interested now. And yet, he said, you still work for us. Latifat didn't fling. No, she said, I work with you. A subtle shift, but an important one. The man's smile returned. Words, he said, they don't change reality. Latifat met his gaze. No, she replied, but action do. Silence. For a moment, neither moves. Then the man spoke again. What exactly do you want, Latifat? Her answer came without hesitation. Balance. The man raised an eyebrow. That's not how system work, he said. Latifat's voice dropped. Then the system is broken. The statement hung in the air, unchallenged. And what will you replace it with? He asked. Latifat paused, not because she didn't know, but because she did. Something that remembers. She said slowly, that debt is not just about money. The man's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. And if I refuse, he asked. Latifat stepped closer. Then I stopped collecting for you, she said. The words were simple, but their meaning explosive, because Latifa was not just another collector. She was influence, reputation, control, and losing her would not be quiet. The man leaned forward slightly. You think you can disrupt this system? He asked. Latifa didn't blink. I know I can, she replied. Silence. Then a soft knock on the door. It opened. Femi stepped in. His eyes moved between them. The tension shifted instantly because now everything was in the same room. The system, the enforcer, the disruptor, and the future of the city balanced on what happened next. Latifat looked at Femi. Femi looked at her. No words, but understanding. The mind behind the desk watched them both, carefully, calculating. Interesting, he said softly, because he saw it too, the possibility that the two forces he had kept separate might become one. And if that happens, the system wouldn't just change, it will collapse. Latifa turned fully towards Femi. This isn't about us anymore, she said. Femi didn't respond immediately, but his silence was no longer opposition, it was consideration. And sometimes that was how resolutions begin. The room held its breath, not metaphorically, truly, as if even the air understood that whatever happened next would not just end the conversation, it will redefine everything. Latifa stood still, Femi stood still, the man behind the desk remained seated, but control had begun to shift. You have created tension, the man said calmly, his fingers slightly touching each other, but tension is not disrupted. Latifat didn't respond immediately because she knew something he didn't. Tension, when held long enough, becomes prayer, and prayer breaks system. This system only works, the man continued, because people obeyed it. Latifat's eye didn't leave his. No, she said quietly, it works because people believe they have no choice. The words landed like truth often does, uncomfortably. The man's expression hardened slightly. Choice is an illusion, he replied. Latifat shook her head. No, she said, it's a risk. Silence. Then Femi spoke. You are wrong. Both of them turned to him, not because he raised his voice, but because of what he chose to say. The man's eyes narrowed. Carefully, he said. Femi stepped forward, not aggressively, not submissively, deliberately. I've done everything you asked, Femi said. Collected, faster, pushed harder, delivered result. He paused. And what did it create? The man didn't answer. Femi continued. Fair, he said. Yes, but also resentment, resistance, collapse, waiting to happen. Latifat watched him carefully because this was the moment. You see results? Femi added. I see cracks. The room shifted again, softly but undeniably. You are not sent here to think, the man said coldly. Femi met his gaze. No, he replied. I was sent here to act. He paused. And now I am. Silent, deep, heavy. Latifat stepped beside him, not behind, not in front, beside. That single movement said everything. The man leaned back slowly, studying them, recalculating. You think this is power? He said. Two collectors standing together. Latifat answered this time. No, she said. Her voice was calm, certain. This is understanding. The man's lips cupped slightly. That's what exactly do you understand? He said. Latifat took a step forward. That system don't fail because people are weak, she said. They fail because they forgot why they exist. The words carried weight. For you, she continued, this is number, efficiency, control. She paused. For us, her eyes flickered briefly to Femi, then back. It's people. Silence followed, not empty. Processing, calculating. The man tapped his finger once to the table. And what do you propose? He asked. Latifat didn't hesitate. We change how debts are collected, she said. No more fear-driven enforcement, Femi added quietly. No more punishment without understanding. The man chuckled softly. You are asking to weaken my system? Latifat shook her head. No, she said. We've been given a chance to strengthen it. The distinction mattered, and the man knew it. But power does not yield easily. And if I refuse, he said again. This time, neither of them stepped back. Femi spoke first. Then you lose control, he said. Latifat followed. Not immediately, she added, but inevitably. The man's eyes narrowed. You are threatening me? Latifat's voice was steady. No, she said. She paused. We are showing you the future. Silence, longer than time, because this is no longer negotiation. It was reality pressing against denial. Finally, the man exhaled, a small sound, but meaningful. You are asking me to trust two people who just challenge my authority? He said. Latifat nodded. Yes, the honesty in that answer left no room for manipulation. The man leaned back again, thinking, because despite everything, he was not foolish, and even the strongest system recognized when adaptation is survival. You will oversee it, he said finally, looking at Latifat. Her expression didn't change. Both of you, he added, glancing at Femi. A pause, but understanding this. His voice sharpened slightly. If it fails, Femi finished the sentence calmly. It won't. Another silence. Then a decision. Fine, the man said. And just like that, the system didn't break. It bent. Weeks passed. The city changed. Slowly, not dramatic, but meaningfully. Collectors no longer arrived like storm. They arrived like conversation. Debtors still paid, but now they were heard, understood, held accountable without being broken. BC reopened as small trade, stronger, more stable, fully recovered, quieter, wiser. Musa still listened, but now the story he had were different. And Latifat stood when she always had. But she was no longer just a collector, she was something more, a bridge between depth and dignity, between power and purpose. One evening, as the sun peeped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Femi walked up beside her. You changed the system, he said. Latifat shook her head slightly. No, she replied. She looked at the people moving through the street, living, trying, balancing. We reminded it what it was supposed to be. Femi nodded slowly. And if it forget again, he said. Latifat smiled faintly. Then we remind it again. The wind moves gently between the streets, not harsh, not heavy, balanced. And for the first time in a long time, the city didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to belong to. Because, in the end, Debt was never just about money, it was about responsibility. And responsibility, when understood, becomes something powerful, not a burden, but a balance. And Latifat, she would always be there, not just to collect, but to remind. Kindly like, share, comment, and wait for the next one to drop. Thank you.